It's Monday, the 24th of January. Good morning, Europe. A very warm welcome to the programme. These are our top stories.
The US has ordered its embassy staff and families to leave Ukraine as America is working hard to bring together its allies as tensions with Russia intensifies. The World Health Organization Europe Regional Director believes the pandemic is moving towards an endgame because of a global immunity. And Italian parliamentarians will vote in a secret ballot for a new president after Silvio Berlusconi dropped out of his dreams of becoming the next head of state.
The US is working hard to bring together its allies in the face of what they say is a likely invasion of Ukraine by Russia. But there are some cracks in old friendships beginning to show. The head of the German Navy was forced to resign following his pro-Putin statements during a speech.
First, we've been very clear that if there is any further Russian aggression in terms of sending Russian forces into Ukraine, there will be a swift, there will be a severe, and there will be a united response.
With the threat of war rising, the US is evacuating families of personnel stationed in the Ukrainian embassy, and it has advised US citizens against travelling to Russia. Meanwhile, EU ministers will meet on Monday to find common ground amid the rising tensions on the bloc's borders.
We will prepare for a difficult situation, have a menu, if I may say so, of sanctions, but the Europeans must be ready at any time to do so.
The UK is on the hardliner side. London accused Russia of planning to install a pro-Russia leader in Kiev.
And we're saying really two things. First of all, Ukraine is a free country. Under international law, it should decide its own fate. We will support them in defending themselves, but also to the international community, European, NATO allies, the US. We're standing shoulder to shoulder, saying there will be very serious consequences if Russia takes this move to try and invade, but also install a puppet regime.
Moscow denies the accusation and says the UK is circulating disinformation. While international diplomacy has been on overdrive to stop a war, Ukrainians on the ground are doing everything they can to prepare for a fight.
The pandemic could soon be over. That's according to the regional director of the World Health Organization Europe. Hans Kluge says he sees COVID-19 transformed to a seasonal disease in the months to come.
So that once that the Omicron wave will subside, there will be for quite some weeks and months a global immunity, either thanks to the vaccine or because people have immunity due to the infection, and also lowering seasonality. So we anticipate that there will be a period of quiet before the COVID-19 may come back towards end of the year, but not necessarily the pandemic coming back. So it's plausible that the region is moving towards a kind of a pandemic endgame, not an endgame of the COVID-19, but a pandemic endgame.
In France, a new vaccine health passport begins today for those over the age of 16. It's despite protests in Paris at the weekend and political resistance. People will have to show them to enter bars, restaurants, gyms and interregional public transport. The pass targets the unvaccinated as a negative COVID test will no longer be sufficient. However, coronavirus infections are surging through Poland. The country saw more than 34,000 new cases during the last 24 hours. This figure is an increase of 132% from last week. Poland has a vaccination rate that is below the European Union average, with more than 21 million receiving their 2 doses.
Thousands of demonstrators in the US marched in Washington, D.C. against COVID-19 restrictions. The capital has adopted mask and vaccine mandates. But President Joe Biden's plan to make the vaccine obligatory for all federal employees was recently shut down by the Supreme Court. In Belgium, Police used water cannon and tear gas in the capital, Brussels, to disperse people protesting COVID-19 government restrictions. Police said the protest drew an estimated 50,000 people. Liberty was the cry as the protesters marched and clashed with the police. In downtown Barcelona, signs read, "It's not a pandemic, it's a dictatorship," as protesters there marched against restrictions imposed by both national and regional authorities. Police said over 1,000 people attended, with many not wearing a mask, breaking Spain's COVID-19 guidelines.
Former Italian Premier Silvio Berlusconi has been undergoing a series of medical examinations in a Milan hospital. The 85-year-old recovered from COVID-19 in 2020, but has been in and out of hospital with complications connected to the infection ever since. He's also in a vulnerable group as he has a heart condition, which meant he had to have a pacemaker fitted several years ago. The government of Burkina Faso has called for calm after soldiers demanded improvements and support for their fight against Islamist militants. A curfew Sunday night was imposed to stop the rioting. Officials say talks will continue with the mutinying soldiers and deny that the army has seized power. Severe snow has hit displaced Syrian communities in the northern countryside of Aleppo. More than 2,000 people have been affected by the weather, which has brought down their tents and also blocked roads, stopping them receiving food. 4 days of fighting continues between the Islamic State group and Kurdish forces. At least 136 people, including civilians, have been killed.
Inflation and the cost of living in the UK is causing more and more people to turn to food banks. According to one of Britain's biggest food bank networks, the Trussell Trust, a record 2.5 million parcels were given to people in crisis last year alone. And the 6-year trend isn't any better. Since 2015, the number of people needing help to obtain food has risen every year. Between 2020 and 2021, there was an increase of 33%. And the Trussell Trust says that 980,000 of those in need were children. Many are putting this rise down to the hike in fuel, energy and food prices, as well as the pandemic. But for many of those needing help, it's a first.
I think a lot of people in the situation who've never been in it before. I think I've been to a food bank once in my life, and this is now my second. I'm normally put something in the food bank trolleys when I go shopping, because but now it's my turn to have some help.
There's definitely people who have got jobs, who are working, because of the costs of living are so high now and their wages haven't gone up to meet those, then there are definitely more people who are working. But there are people who've lost their jobs.
The cost of living in Britain is forecast to soar higher in April as a tax hike is expected. For now, the number of food bank users is not likely to drop.
It was an open-air extravaganza. The Lithuanian city of Kaunas marked the start of its programme as European Capital of Culture 2022 with ceremony and fanfare. The main attraction was a spectacular light show with video projections, a kind of visual time travel through the history of Kaunas, which wants to reinvent itself as a capital of culture. Some 40,000 spectators attended despite freezing temperatures.
In Lithuania, we have a saying, Kaunas is Kaunas. Today, I want to say it a bit differently. Kaunas is culture, Lithuania's and Europe's culture.
Dozens of festivals, exhibitions, events and concerts will take place in Kaunas over the next 12 months.